This past week, the latest Armored Core game was released, and From Software has unleashed the latest hell onto consumers. As it turns out, the scariest thing imaginable is not a giant demon or monster or millennia. It is a giant helicopter that likes to shoot a lot of missiles. And once again recontextualizes the discussion about difficulty and what it means for the perception of the consumer. And for today's Critical Thought, we're going to try and answer this question. Do people actually like difficult games? I guess it's only a full circle moment that the many people who have argued for Dark Souls and Elden Ring difficulty, the infamous get good, are now at the receiving end of it when it comes to Armored Core 6, as the tutorial boss has been making waves on social media and with people just utterly suffering through it. And for those of you that did manage to get through it, then they ran into the horror of the Chapter 1 boss. But with people arguing about how difficult it is, how frustrating it is, why did From Software stupidly make this, it's broken, it's overpowered, it feels like we've had this conversation before, and more importantly, we've had this discussion about From Software's MO when it comes to design, difficulty, and challenge. That their games are very much akin to starting over at either 1 or very close to 1 in terms of your knowledge at the world. You are supposed to walk into a new From Software game and get smacked down faster than you can say a quick boost. But that still hasn't stopped people from saying, no, you just suck at the game, no, it's perfect. And I think we've had this whole conversation at some point many times in the past. Now, in an earlier video, I talked a lot about the idea of designing a game around challenge and difficulty. And in that video, I said that for a lot of people, they don't like difficulty in their games. Or to be more specific, they don't like the feeling of losing. And this is something, again, that a lot of people, I think, tend to not understand. There's a difference between playing a challenging game that you are accustomed to. If you're really good at platforming, you're not going to feel that sting playing Super Meat Boy or N++, or pick any other of that type. If you're really good at Dark Souls, then you're probably going to be really good at Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring. But here's where it gets very interesting. The people who have, again, sharpened their teeth and their action combat RPG skills on Dark Souls and the other From Software games, guess what? None of that helps you when it comes to playing Armored Core. And Armored Core is not a Souls-like, and I don't want to hear any arguments against that point. And this is what we've talked about before when it comes to player perception, onboarding, UI, UX. That it's easy to look at a game you're familiar with and instantly know the challenge and the skill curve you need to win. Again, I've played a lot of difficult games, and I'm waiting for someone here to leave a comment who has no idea who I am, saying, oh, this guy just plays games on the easiest setting, while we've been going through Turbo Overkill on Murder Machine, because I found very hard to be boring. But it's a different story when someone who has no knowledge, no skill at a game, goes into a hard game for the first time. And again, when they get to that just, face-slapping moment of, hey, I'm walking down the corridor. Here's the boss who one-shots you. Or, it's time for the School of Hard Knocks, as Armored Core gives you the tutorial after the boss that you could have used said tutorial to learn. And that, I know some people are joking about it, but I do agree with people who say that is not good onboarding. And again, it gets at this kind of discussion about what does it mean to make a difficult game and what does it mean to play and learn it. As I've talked about before, when it comes to roguelike and any kind of rogue-based design, it is still considered a niche market in the grand scheme of things. Because a lot of people don't like to play a game, whether it is an hour long, 5 hours long, 25 minutes long, where if you lose, the game just says, okay, we're taking everything you've earned, tossing in the trash, go start it again. And this is, again, one of those points that for those of you who are longtime fans and viewers watching this, we are well accustomed to roguelike, roguelite, challenging games, masochistic games, anything along those lines. But it is a different story when you're putting this in front of someone who has never touched these games before. And this also cuts both ways. For people who are demanding that From Software nerf the first boss or introduce difficulty settings, they're also not seeing the bigger picture. And again, it's why when we talk about challenging games in this balance of building titles around this kind of gameplay, there has to be a give and take. The designer needs to present this in a way that is a kind of affordable so that someone can learn how to play. There is an option to win. But on the flip side, the consumer needs to come into it with this mindset that your first plan may not work. Your fifth plan may not work. Your 487th plan may not work. Or if this game is built on dodging and parrying and you say to yourself, you know what, I hate dodging and parrying, I'm just going to play this game through blocking, well, the game is not going to like that, and neither will your experience at it. And again, this is one of those elements that has been kind of drilled in to From Software's design as well as any kind of challenging game. These games are a challenge because they demand you adhere to their rules. It's not the other way around. This is not a game where you're supposed to just say, you know what, I want to build a, I don't know, a fireball, a mace strategy, and I will only use that for the next 20 to 40 hours. And the game throws a boss at me that is fire immune, then it's obviously the game's fault for not letting me just use the one same strategy over and over again. And like I said in my roguelike discussion, it's why roguelike design is a really good kind of life lesson for a lot of people in terms of learning to roll with the punches and learning to adapt. And again, it's very funny and weird at the same time that we're seeing a lot of people who, again, From Software games, they just have got exposed to it through the Dark Souls or the Elden Ring games, now getting hit with something that they're now familiar with and wondering what the hell is going on. And there is no easy answer to this. Because as I said in the last video, and in that post I wrote regarding the quote from Miyazaki on this topic, the Dark Souls, Souls-like design is meant to push you to get better. Armored Core follows a very similar MO, but this is also kind of push even further with the idea of building your mech. That again, if a boss is designed around lots and lots of missiles and hitting you with lots of objects, building a slow-moving mech or a slow-moving AC may not be the best strategy. Could you win with an AC that's completely antithetical to that boss? Yes. And I'm sure there is someone right now playing Armored Core 6 purposely building the most randomly weird builds that you can imagine, and they're probably going to try and beat the entire game with, or maybe do no-hit runs on a few of those bosses. And that is entirely fair. Where a lot of people, I feel, who have kind of missed this idea behind the From Software games are the very same people who argue, oh, you can't use summoning to be a fighting Elden Ring. Oh, you must only use these specific weapons. Or if you use magic, then you're breaking the game. If you use summons, you're breaking the game. If you don't play the game like X, Y, and Z, you're breaking the game. And like we've said, what makes these Souls-like games, and again, now adding Armored Core into the mix, work, is their way of having inherent difficulty design. If a boss is designed to be built to fight for range, take out a ranged weapon, the fight becomes a lot easier. Do you want to make it harder? Don't use a ranged weapon. Armored Core allows you to just, again, fine-tune and change your AC at a moment's notice. You're not punished in this game for saying, you know what, I'm going to invest heavily in missiles. And then I find, you know what, missiles don't work on that boss. Just sell all those missile packs, try a laser gun, a machine gun, a rocket launcher, and you're able to just keep messing around with it. Again, this is one of the things that we've talked about before in terms of good UX for challenging games. You want, if you're going to have punishment, you want punishment to be short to maybe midterm. You never want a player's decision to create long-term punishment. If I fail and run out of money and I can't buy a part that I want to beat a boss or get through a tough stage, let me just sell the parts that I'm not using, get that money, get what I need, and then if I never want to do that mission again, sell that part, get those parts back, and once again go back to it. To bring us back into this larger conversation about difficulty into that original question, again, as we've said, people, or a lot of people, don't like difficulty. And again, I want to make this very clear. We're not talking about challenge in this respect. When we talk about challenge, we're referring to if I am a pro platforming fan, or if I'm a pro racing fan, or anything like that, and I'm playing those games, then I'm being adequately challenged for my ability. It's a different story to say, you know what, I am a racing fan, and now I'm going to try and learn to play Stellaris, or learn to play Sekiro, or even learn to play Star Fox, or anything that is not in your wheelhouse. This is when we talk about the challenge of difficulty, and why games that are meant to have that bite to them, that challenge you to get better and will punish you until you learn those lessons, will always be inherently niche in the mainstream market. And again, when we talk about Souls-like design and From Software, this is more of an anomaly in the system rather than this brave new defining moment. Because I can tell you that a lot of people who play through Dark Souls or Sekiro or Elden Ring or anything like that, if you tried the same kind of design in a game that doesn't have the same level of prestige and clout, they're probably not going to stick around. And unfortunately, we have seen this time and time again, that when a game pushes back, a lot of people will just say, nope, done, I don't want to do it. And maybe if they offer an easy mode or an auto skip or something else along those lines, they may kind of go through it some more. But again, as I've said before, those elements should not be what you're balancing a game around. You want to have your game be as balanced as possible, and then have elements to either raise or lower the heat accordingly. If you balance your game under the assumption that anyone who has trouble will just hit auto skip, you're going to end up with a less than stellar game. Because some people may never even know you have an auto skip, they'll just get frustrated and hate your game. Or people will know there's an auto skip, but they still aren't liking how your game plays out. It doesn't feel right to them, so they're going to leave. And again, it's why we say it is very hard to make a challenging game, and it's very difficult to get someone into that mindset if they don't already have it. And again, I'm kind of, as I said earlier, I'm still surprised that so many Elden Ring and Dark Souls fans are kind of pushing back against Armored Core. Because again, it's this idea of what happens when you go into a game at 0. Again, it's a very fair question. So here's to throw it over to you. When you play a game, or when you're looking at games to play and buy, do you ever buy games that you have no familiarity with? If you're a hardcore action fan, have you ever decided one day to buy a turn-based JRPG. If you've been a turn-based JRPG fan, have you ever thought about playing Doom Eternal or Ultra Kill? And what do you do when you run into those walls? When you don't have a background in a genre and that game is just kicking your butt? Do you keep playing? Or do you just go to a game that you enjoy? Because again, that is certainly a fair point. If you're not enjoying a game for whatever reason, go play something else. I know it's a very shocking thing. But again, it's this kind of issue that we run into when we talk about challenge and difficulty. And it's why, as a designer, you need to be very careful with how you onboard and present these elements. When we had our discussion with Tomo and with the roundtable about difficulty, we've spoken about this. That someone needs to feel like they are moving forward. Whether it's in inches, miles, or even like smaller into millimeter space. If they feel like they're stuck or they're going backwards, a lot of people will not stick around, they'll get frustrated, and they're never going to play that game again. And it's why, for a lot of the more challenging games, they tend to remove or downplay the act of punishment. Because the game is already hard enough, we don't need to twist that blade any further. To wrap up our critical thought, difficulty is always in the eye of the beholder. But as a designer, you need to understand that unless you're talking about your hardest of your hardcore fans, most people don't want to play a game that is akin to walking through a door and getting smacked in the face by a 2x4. Some people may enjoy that. Some people will instinctively know to duck before they go under that door and wonder, why are you complaining? Just get good at ducking. But if you're trying to make a game that's more approachable, you need to kind of exemplify the onboarding and the approachable nature of it. People who are used to these games will jump through any and all hoops that you set before them. If you're talking about someone who's at step 0 of these games, they're not going to do it. Unless, again, we are talking about a game that is built heavily on like prestige and clout, like the From Software games. Again, there's no doubt in my mind that if another developer released a game similar to Armored Core 6, it would not be getting anywhere near the same news as Armored Core 6 right now. But for those of you watching this, I somehow doubt that you have the same level of notoriety as From Software Nintendo. If you do, let me know in the comments down below. When you're trying to build good onboarding, again, you want to assume that the player is starting at 0. And yes, that may annoy your expert fans who have to sit through the umpteenth tutorial of move over here, A is the jump button, down A lets you jump down. But it's better to make sure that everyone is on the same page before you unleash the hounds, rather than just assuming that everyone who's played your game has studied hours of videos and guides and has played every one of your games prior to this one. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.